Welcome back for the December 2025 AI Coding Roundup. Now, it is impossible for me to test every possible combination of agent and model. Please drop comments below and upvote them so I know the ones you guys care a lot about. For example, I've heard about OpenHands, but I don't know a lot of people using it. Continue.dev, I don't know a lot of people using it. So I'm trying to touch the ones that I hear the most people talk about. Anyway, let's jump into it. As always, I want to cover any of the new entrants that I think are worth mentioning. Google Anti-Gravity. Now, this came out, and honestly, I think it's a little bit wonky. I haven't put more than maybe 6 or 7 hours into it, and I like where they're going with it. But there's a lot of bugs and kinks, and honestly, the agent needs a little bit of work, which you'll see from the scores that we'll post here in a little bit. I do also want to touch on the reason that I think videos like this are important is that there are different types of tool calling. What I used to call prompt-based tool calling, I think a better name for that is virtual tool calling. Virtual tool calling basically fakes a tool call by putting the tool call data into the prompt response from the LLM. Then it is on the harness's ability to parse that and do what the actual tool call says. Now, this is nice because agents like root code and kilo code, what happens is if you have a model that doesn't support native tool calling, a lot of local models are like that, they will work in these agents. But there are a lot of agents, like Continue Dev, for example, that are actually trying to support both. So they will detect when you have a model that actually doesn't support native tool calling, and they'll try to switch to virtual tool calling. It's a very complicated thing. So native tool calling typically is something like this, where you actually have an array, and what ends up happening is the model will call back into your harness and say, hey, I want you to call this function. Here's whatever ID it is. Here's the parameters passed in. You call that, you return the response back, and it's all very structured based on the parameters that are in the function itself. Where the virtual tool calling is typically XML and in the actual LLM's response back to the user. Now, the other thing that I'm starting to see here is this bifurcation between very specific tools versus very generic tools. Now, one thing that I want to say is I don't know what's better here, but I can say when you have a lot of tools, I've seen some of these agents have 20, 30. I actually was working with one project that had 50 some tools, like function calls in there, and all of them were getting stuffed into context. Now, tool descriptions can pollute context a lot. Now, imagine all of these details about each of these tools getting put into the context window. It eats into it. I'm seeing like this bifurcation between specific tools and more generic tools. And the generic tools actually rely on terminal commands or even writing code to execute things like searching, creating, editing. It's very interesting. Just something to keep an eye on. But it is also something that I think different models are better at than others. For example, like the Codex models, I think are really good at calling terminal commands. Here's an example of like what warp.dev will give you. They kind of sit in between. They've got these types of tools like read files, create files, apply patch, file glob. Now, think about that. A lot of this could actually be abstracted out to literally, potentially, one or two generic tools that allow some underlying terminal command to actually go through and create or read and things like that. So just keep that in mind as we kind of go forward. I actually was very confused for a while when I saw a lot of these agents like doing Python behind the scenes and terminal command behind the scenes. But actually, I don't know. I think there might be something to it, specifically because of the amount of context you have to give for each of the particular tools to get it to actually call it at the right time. Anyway, I cover this every month, but instruction following, that's really what I'm measuring. So this would be more of a spec-driven development flow. So you're going to have very specific details. So this would be like if you have a good plan with execution that says what files actually need to be created, where they need to be, what they need to do, this actually will measure that. Now, one of the things that I actually learned is like with the Gemini 3 Pro model, for example, there's some of these that actually do a little bit worse job, like further into context on the instruction following based on the initial prompt given. I actually run unit tests over it. So all these unit tests are built such that if they follow the instructions 100%, the agents will score 100% on it. And I do LLM as a judge to kind of just check for quality, because you guys know how LLMs can sometimes do things that actually run tests correctly, but ultimately aren't the best way to do things. Here's an example. All of my current tests right now are between 12 and like 28 files being edited or created. Now, GPT 5.1 actually has very high variance in certain agents. So sometimes it'll score on par with Claude Sonnet 4.5. Other times it'll be like really bad because it'll go and do something that it shouldn't do. Sonnet 4.5 still over engineers. It creates tons of documentation. Anyone that uses this knows how frustrating this could be. Not the end of the world, but you are paying for this a lot of times. You're using your credits, you're using your tokens. It can be kind of annoying. The harnesses matter a ton for Gemini 3.0 Pro, more than I expected. And if you watch my last video on Gemini 3.0 Pro, you can see where I actually noted that even in Cursor, it would have times where it would just quit calling tools. When I ran this across all these harnesses, there were some harnesses that suffered from that way worse than others. This doesn't seem to be a model that's just like plug and play, and it's just going to get good results in every harness. A lot of it probably comes down to the choices that were made when engineering it. I had a lot of issues with Augment Code and Copilot. Now, there have been some people that actually mentioned in my Discord that Copilot with Gemini 3.0 Pro is awesome. I was unable to test this because I wanted to test it with the models available in Copilot for the subscription. I literally would get an error on about 60% of my tests. I was not able to actually complete any of them to any sort of satisfaction. So I did not include that. It's just going to be a 0. Same for 5.1. Augment Code, though, also had issues with 5.1. I tried on 2 different days and still had issues with actually completing my test. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. So those will be 0. I know a lot of people ask, where adjustable for any of the models. This includes Opus, Sonnet 4.5, GPT 5.1. I picked the max thinking reasoning level depending what the harness had available to it. Some just have a brain icon like Cursor. Some allow me to select medium, low, high. Some allow me to adjust by selecting it as part of the model picker. I picked the highest available reasoning in every agent just to even and remove variables from what I'm actually running here. Now the models, of course, Claude 4.5 Sonnet, it's kind of my baseline. Although I will say Opus 4.5 has come out, and even though the price is a little bit higher than 4.5 Sonnet, I do find it to be a little bit more token efficient when I'm doing actual work. So time will tell if it's a full swap or not. Although I have heard that the price of this is going to go up to like 2 or 3x in Cursor over time, which that is a lot. GPT 5.1, I really was interested how this model was actually going to perform. I did test GPT 5.1 Codex Max, in where you can only test that in the Codex CLI. And of course, the long-awaited Gemini 3.0 Pro, which I do think is a good model. It's just the harness matters a lot for it. So Claude 4.5. Number 3, GitHub Copilot, 26,774. Now keep an eye on these scores here. 26,774, 26,958 with Claude Code for number 2, and our number 1 again, holding the top spot again, ZAI. It is a good agent with Claude Sonnet 4.5, 27,434. Now, this is the overall score. So we can take a look here. Zed, Claude Code, Copilot Crush came in, and pretty much it did tie Root Code, so Crush and Root Code. Cursor slightly behind, but still very respectable. You could pretty much assume any one of these that are in the 26,000 are going to be really good. Surprisingly, this bottom one here, Claude Code, this is actually haiku. So this might actually be confusing, and I need to actually edit this, so if anyone screenshots it. This is the haiku model. I wanted to include that as part of an evaluation. So you can see the haiku model's significantly behind. Kiro was actually doing fairly poorly, honestly, with Sonnet 4.5 comparatively, which also surprised me. And then Droid kind of at the bottom here. Also, warp.dev surprised me as being down here. Typically, I would have assumed that one to be up higher. Now, GPT 5.1. I don't know why, but for some reason, Windsurf always works well with the GPT models. And this is just a solid score, 24,764. Warp always seems to work well with the GPT 5.1 models. And open code, this one blew my mind. Like, look at this score jump here, 24.7, 25.3, 26.8. So for some reason, open code works incredibly well with GPT 5.1. I don't know if that's by accident or if they've tuned it. Knowing what they post on X, I'm assuming this is just the harness that they built happens to work good with GPT 5.1. Now you can see here at the bottom, I've got Augment CLI and Copilot at 0. OpenCode has a commanding lead here, followed by Warp Dev, Windsurf, RooCode, Zed. Surprisingly, Codex CLI does actually very poor with straight up GPT 5.1 on my evals. Droid does fairly poor with it. Cursor does fairly poor with it. And Crush does fairly poor with it. So I cannot really recommend GPT 5.1 except for maybe in the top 4 or 5 here options. Otherwise, it's going to probably be a little bit more painful from it basically doing improper tool calling or literally just not executing on the instructions that you give it. Now, this is the Max version. The Codex, what is it called? Codex 5.1 Max model with high reasoning. And you can see here, it beat everything else but the open code version. I can't actually run open code I can't actually run the Codex Max model in any of the other ones as far as I know. So this actually ends up being the number 2 model. And if you're going to be using the Codex CLI, I don't see a reason why you don't use the Max version of this. It is far superior to the base GPT 5.1 model. Now, this is probably one of the most hyped models in all of existence. And I do think it's a good model. I do think it has a better design taste. My tests do not actually test that. I do think that it does a pretty good job with the larger context and being able to go a little bit deeper into it. But when it comes to executing a spec or building something that you know you need to build and you've got a good plan for it, it's not going to beat any of the other models by a significant amount, if at all. Cursor actually is really good. I actually used this in Cursor for days, and it was great. 25,754. I actually felt like it did a good job for me. No complaints there. Crush, pretty much equal to Cursor here, but it's the first entry for Crush, and I think that's 25,834 is a respectable score. But then this surprised me because Amped has actually switched over to focus on Gemini 3.0 Pro. And this actually shows that their tuning of the harness to probably do specific things with Gemini 3.0 Pro might be working for them. 26,474, very respectable, very solid score. Now, overall, we see that Amp Code wins, Crush, Cursor, Windsurf, and Droid pretty much neck and neck. We get down here at the bottom, and actually, the first time that Gemini 3.0 Pro came out, I was at a conference, and I started running it in root code, and my evals were like doing very poor. I'm like, oh, it must be something with like maybe I got to configure something. But no, it honestly just doesn't work great in root code. It doesn't work great in anti-gravity, which is crazy to me for my evals because of how large they are. Droid, and it also wasn't great. But if you go up to Warp Dev to any of the ones above, I think it's a respectable finish. But it is not a leap above Gemini 4.5 Sonnet. And depending on the language you're using, you may just love Gemini 3 better. I found it actually pretty good at Unity code. I found it pretty good at machine learning stuff that I was doing, data pipelines, Spark stuff. I actually found it pretty good at PHP. So everything I used it on, it seemed to have a really good amount of knowledge, but it would hit like weird kinks to where it was harder to steer the way I wanted it to, or it would actually just quit calling tools, which is very unfortunate. And I think that shows in kind of some of the scores here. Now, this model blew my mind when it came out. So when I first heard about it, I honestly was about to ignore it because it's so expensive. When Opus 4.1 came out, I ran some tests and it was like $50 for basic stuff. But Opus 4.5 actually has a respectable price. Time will tell how it actually prices out in Cursor and some of the other tools that I'm actually using, like Claude Code. Right now, Claude Code, I have a lot of usage of Opus. I've been using it 100% of the time. GitHub Copilot, number 3, 27,490. Amazing score. One of the highest scores I've gotten so far. Warp, 27,558. Again, amazing score. 27,654 with Claude Code. Just like absolutely killer scores. You can see here that just Opus, consistent. It works freaking amazing on every agent I tested it on. Unbelievably so. And by far the most consistent model across any of the harnesses. And all of them you'd be happy with using. The ones I've used it in the most right now, Claude Code and Cursor, but even some of the open source like Root Code, Open Code, just absolutely killer. Now, here's the overall scores. Pretty clear here, at least from my benchmark. Anthropic has the lead by a significant margin. 27,654 is our Opus 4.5. Our first entry is by GPT 5.1. Is about 800 points less than that, about 750 points less than that. Then we wanted to go to the Gemini 3 Pro. We're looking at, 1,200 points-ish less. So, like, it's a pretty big orange and red, which is Sonnet 4.5 and Opus, like, win here. And unfortunately, GPT 5.1 kind of sits at the bottom of the pack over here. And honestly, when I was using it when it came out, it was very frustrating. The Max version, though, seems very good. So this Codex CLI GPT 5.1 Code Max, this might be the best way to use this with your Codex CLI. I'll have to do some actual work with it to kind of see how it feels over time. Gemini 3 feels better than it scores, but I will say that it kind of varies because when I'm doing UI stuff, I think it's just a killer job at helping me take whatever design system I have and make something. I actually think it does a good job going deep in context, but it becomes harder to steer as you go forward. It does end up running into issues with tool call failures. Like I was working on this problem and all of a sudden it just wouldn't call tools anymore, but in all of its thinking and what it was putting out, it was saying it was going to call tools, but it wouldn't. It just gave up on it. Kind of unfortunate. Claude Code back on top. GPT 5.1 unfortunately matches what I expected. I am just very sad. I really thought for a while that the Codex models, the GPT-5 models, was actually going to have like a fighting chance to stay up with the Anthropic models, but they seem to have definitely decayed some, or the other models have jumped past it. The other thing maybe I would note here is 2 of my tests that have never been 100%ed before actually were 98%ed. And that was all done by Opus. So it's actually getting harder and harder to actually have evals that are hard enough to measure some of these. I still have some that have room to go, but it is wild to me that tests that I did not think would actually ever hit 75, 80% because of the scope of how much you're writing are actually getting, 90, 95, 98% by some of these models now. So what will I be using in December? Well, first off, it's open code. Just amazing for me to pull in any of the Chinese models. It's just a solid agent, solid harness with Sonnet 4.5, with Opus, with Gemini 3 Pro. It's okay. With GPT 5.1, apparently it's great. I'll have to do some more testing with that, like to see how that actually feels. They also have reworked a lot of the UI on it, and it feels a lot more crisp. The experience is a lot better. The team has really been cooking there, so I'm excited to kind of follow that. And I really am a fan of open source coding agents. Unlike the next 2 that I'm going to be talking about, I do want to make sure I'm always supporting open code and root code and those because they're putting a lot into building these agents for us to be able to have. And these closed source tools are actually learning a lot from them and probably incorporating a lot of the work that they're doing. And next, Claude Code. I love the $100 a month plan. I'm getting a good amount of my usage that I do every week. Opus 4.5 being your default is just phenomenal. Having Sonnet 4.5 on a different usage tier, also great. I don't know how a lot of these companies are going to compete with Claude Code over time. I do wish it was open source, but I love what they do with the limits and stuff that they have set now. I love the daily limits. I love the way they do the weekly limits, so I got very clear understanding of where I'm at and all of that. And I love that it's a fixed price for $100 a month. Very hard to compete with that when you're doing a pay for usage through like a root code or open code, unfortunately. And number one, I've never had this on my list before, but Cursor is awesome. $200 a month plan. I love their plan mode. I love being able to do 2, 3, 4x creations of things with the work trees built in. I know it's been wonky a little bit off and on, but it's honestly amazing. It's an amazing workflow. New models come out, they have it instantly. I'm very excited about where Cursor's going. I hate their credit system. I really hate it. I wish that would change. But at the end of the day, like, it is a solid experience. And it's one that's actually brought me on board to actually be a fan. Coming from someone that was very critical of how secretive they felt around how they were like nerfing models and they were trying to dumb it down for us. I feel like they're starting to get better at that. Awesome agent. I think it's very solid across the board. But for $200 a month, I get a ton of usage across a bunch of different models. And I love it. I love just the workflow that they've enabled there. The new agent switch with the IDE, just incredible. Now, some honorable mentions. Course Codex CLI, I've actually started to use that less and less. There was a time where that was my main tool. And it's unfortunate. I feel like either the GPT models have decayed some or the other ones have just like leapfrogged them. I could be wrong. There are probably some people here that would say like I'm totally wrong on that, and I'm okay with that. Everybody's working on different projects. All I know is like what I'm actually testing here. Now, root code, I love root code. I love the team there. I love what they're doing. I will constantly support them. It is one of my favorite tools to actually pull up and test new models in. Now, Warp, oh, they have just butchered their pricing. But their terminal emulator that they have, the terminal app is just so good. And their agent is good. I have a low price plan for them. I'm going to continue the low price plan for them just because I love the terminal experience. And I do like being able to run some agentic jobs through there, even if I'm just automating something like locally on my computer. I know it's so disappointing the way they bork the pricing. I could do an entire video on this completely because right before they did that, I had done a video where I talked about the best like coding agents at each price tier. And Warp, I recommended you, but now it's very hard to, unless you have just extra money to burn. But the terminal plan, the terminal like baseline plan, just to have the terminal experience is actually probably worth it. I still hate that I can't have it in my IDE, but I'm getting more used to just having that over here on my second monitor. And I think that's going to wrap it up. Let me know your comments below. I have been incredibly busy for the last probably 10, 14 days. I appreciate you all bearing with me. Sorry I missed last month. I've been going through a lot as my company has gotten acquired and I'm moving into a new role at a much larger company, which has been awesome because I've got to see how what it's like actually rolling AI coding tools into a company with many, many engineers and how that actually works. It's been just a really, really great experience for me. I do actually foresee myself being able to get back more on a normal rhythm here. I don't know if I'll be able to make the entire number of videos that I was doing. At one time I was doing a video a day and then I dropped to 4 a week. That may be hard, but I still want to make sure I'm doing a couple a week and to get the big ones out with testing because the testing takes days for me to do. And I want to make sure that I'm getting those out ahead of time. Anyway, leave your comments below. Would love to understand kind of where you guys actually fall. It's amazing to me how much of these have converged. And I actually did a talk at AI Native DevCon on where I would like to take testing for LLMs for coding long term so that we could actually push the testing scale a little bit higher. Problem is just going to be time and commitment to that. Anyway, I appreciate you all. Till next time, everyone. Peace out.